Count Corla. Taoiseach, the Data Protection Commissioner's 172-page report into the Public Services Card provides us with much more than just the findings of her lengthy investigation, which has been ongoing since 2017. It tells us of the flawed arguments put forward by the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection that are in some instances totally nonsensical. It also gives us a very clear insight as to the Department's attitude towards the Data Commissioner, one that can only be described as embarrassing and indeed childish. And I say embarrassing when I think of the 470 scanned pages, unnumbered and illogically sent by the Department to the Commissioner as their response to the Commissioner's initial draft report, like a child throwing a tantrum. Unprofessional and unbefitting of a government department within this state, it has to be said. We see a total lack of regard for taxpayers' money, which we have seen time and time again from this government. In fact, the department threatened the Data Commissioner with legal proceedings back in October last year when they weren't getting their own way with getting more time to respond to the draft report, even though the Commissioner had already extended the deadline for reply. Totally unwarranted and unreasonable. The Commissioner makes reference in a report to the Minister's insistence in arguing that there is no evidence of dissatisfaction with the public service card. Is she forgetting the uproar when an elderly lady lost her pension payment for not having a card, or the delays experienced by people forced to get a public service card in order to allow them to apply for a passport or indeed a driver's licence, or people who were adopted being denied a card unless they had an adoption certificate, or any of the numerous complaints received about the public service card to her department, deeper, or the Department of Foreign Affairs. Hardly screams of satisfaction, it has to be said. The holding of personal documentation belonging to those who apply for the public service card by the Department indefinitely cannot be explained. The Department's to this was that the process of satisfying the Minister as to identity is not necessarily complete once the card issues. Yet, under legislation, it clearly states that a public service card will not be issued unless a Minister is satisfied to the identity of the person. So which is it? Taoiseach, you said yesterday that your view on the Data Commissioner's findings is supported by outside legal counsel.
Thank you, Deputy. Time is up.
I believe that advice should be published by government in the public interest. And Taoiseach, will you publish it? And also, are you concerned by the clarification given by the Department to the Commissioner that not everyone who was issued with a public service card went through the Safe 2 process? Some did and some didn't. How, Taoiseach, was this differentiated, and how does that combat fraud?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Well, first of all, I want to say that, like the majority of people in this House, I'm a big supporter of the public service card, and I think it's worked extremely well. Over 3 million people in Ireland now have a public service card, including me, and when people are asked what they think about the public service card that they have, over 80% of people are satisfied with it and prefer it to what they would have had before, which would have been a number of different books and passes: pension books, children's allowance books, free travel passes, social welfare services card. It's replaced all of those and given people one simple card which enables them to access public services. And that's what the public service card is. It's exactly what it says in the tin. It's what it was intended to be in 1998 and in 2005 when it was introduced in legislation. It's there to assist people to access public services and to make public services more efficient to deliver. It is not primarily about fraud, but it does have benefits in terms of deterrence and reducing fraud as well. But its primary purpose is to make it easier for people to access the public services and benefits that they're entitled to, and also makes it more efficient for government departments and agencies to provide those public services. And the reason why most people support it and like it is that instead of having to go through the rigmarole of going to the chemist, getting passport photos, signing them on the back, going to the Garda station, getting forms signed, filling them in, finding a utility bill, and having to do that every year, every couple of years when you engage with a new government service, you only have to do that once. And that's the big advantage in the public service card. And it's why it has worked very well. In the pension case that you mentioned, I think it's worth putting on the record of the House that the Data Protection Commissioner actually found in favour of the Department on the issue of that particular pension case. But it was dealt with sympathetically in any case by the Minister, accepting that there was a conscientious objection there. In terms of legal advice, it's not our practice to publish legal advice either from the AG or outside counsel. We won't be doing that, but obviously if this case goes to the court, goes to Circuit Court or to High Court thereafter, then of course that legal advice will be made public at that point, and that is the normal procedure when it comes to litigation.
Brady, yes.
Taoiseach, what we had there was just a rehashing of all your arguments as to the benefits, perceived benefits of the card. Of course, the Data Protection Commissioner says all of that, fine, but it's totally illegally done. The collection and retention of individuals' data, completely illegal. And I ask again that third-party legal advice would be issued. I know it's a practice here that the advice from the Attorney-General isn't made public, but I think there is a strong argument for that third-party advice to be issued. Of course, the 3.2 million people had no choice but to get the public services card because it was, of course, mandatory but not compulsory. So, Taoiseach, can I ask the question as to whether you are going to implement, clearly reading between the lines, you aren't going to implement the findings of the Data Protection Commissioner, you are going to continue to illegally implement the use of the public service card and essentially put it back to the Data Protection Commissioner to initiate enforcement proceedings, so it ends up in the court. And I think that is an unfortunate continuation of the waste of public funds. Can I just ask, in terms of the continuation of the rollout of the public service card, because we know the National Childcare Scheme, it's going to be a requirement from October on that the public service card would be a requirement. And we also know that there's plans for school transport cases that are being appealed, that there will be a requirement for the public service card. Under the current system, there's no ID needed for that process whatsoever. So, Taoiseach, rather than giving us, I suppose, your selling points as to the benefits of the card, which is illegal, you should fully implement the findings of the Data Protection Commissioner and desist in your continuous undermining of the Commissioner and indeed her good office.
Thanks very much, Deputy. First of all, in relation to the National Childcare Scheme, as you know, that's coming into effect later in this year. It will provide increased subsidies for childcare for tens of thousands of families across the state, and for the first time, about 10,000 middle-income families will qualify for childcare subsidies for the first time. The vast majority of these families, about 80%, have the public service card already and will be able to apply for those subsidies and increased subsidies online. And I think the vast majority of them will do that. Because they will see the convenience of just being able to take out your public service card, apply for those childcare subsidies online and get those subsidies without having to go through all the rigmarole of filling in forms, getting photographs, producing bank statements and all of that. However, for those who want to, that option will be available. So there will be an option available for those who don't want to get a public service card. But mark my words, people will vote with their feet and their keyboards. And the vast majority of those parents will use the public service card to apply for that subsidy because it makes sense. Moving online, digitisation is the future, providing public services to people in this country, but the alternative will be there. Just in relation to the Data Protection Commissioner's report, we have yet to receive an enforcement order from the Data Protection Commissioner. When that arrives, obviously the Department will study it, and if this case goes to litigation, well then at that point in time, of course, any legal advice will be made available. The Minister has offered to meet the Data Protection Commissioner to discuss her concerns and findings, but unfortunately the Data Protection Commissioner has declined that request. But one thing I would say is that this is a democracy. The right of appeal is part of a democracy. It's in our constitution.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
It is not unusual for the government to appeal a decision. Dublin City Council made a ruling against the injecting centre in Merchants Quay. Government has appealed that to Mbor Pleanála. The European Commission on occasion makes decisions that we don't agree with. We appeal that to the European Court of Justice. I think we would be undermining the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner if somehow we said that her office was unique and that there was no right of appeal. That would be the wrong approach.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy